you gone to a gun store and tried to buy any ammunition lately? Have you done any recreational shooting? Are you watching the laws in your state get ever more hostile to your firearms ownership? Well, if you're like a lot of us, yes, and the results are not good. I was in a gun store just the other day, and I had to go through the usual process that has become the new normal. Do you have X? Do you have Y? Do you just have Z? And if you're lucky, they have it, but they'll still be rationing you to 1 or 2 boxes per customer per day. It's not good out there. There is an ammunition shortage, prices are through the roof, and people are buying firearms, firearms accessories, and ammunition like it's going out of style. This has been going on for a while now. There's plenty of crazy theories as to what's causing it, but the actual cause doesn't matter. The fact is, if you are going to be the most prepared person you can be, you need to be able to practice with your firearm, you need to be able to engage in tactical firearms training, and you need to have some means of doing it. If you can't get ammunition and you're afraid to burn off what you have, what are your choices? Hello, everyone. I am Buck Green, Operations Manager of the International Society of Close Quarter Combatants, and tonight we're talking to our very own Shawn Armstrong, who, as you may recall, we interviewed previously about long-range shooting. I'm a fan of his work, and I just ordered his new book on tactical firearms training, and that is what we're here to talk about tonight, tactical firearms training on a budget. Shawn Armstrong is a soldier's soldier who served with distinction in the United States Army for 23 years. Hello, Shawn. How are you?
Well, I'm fine.
It's good to have you with us again. Those of you who don't know, Shawn is a participant at the ISCQC website. Moving quickly through the ranks and soaking up every training opportunity he could find, Shawn performed combat duties as a sniper, a machine gunner, and even as an M1 tank crewman and anti-armor specialist. He's done some hard sand time in both Afghanistan and Iraq, conducting combat patrols, raids, and personal security for VIPs, and he's been exposed to the military's most advanced weapons and tactics training that he's carried with him in such post-retirement missions as an executive protection specialist, gunsmith, and combat shooting firearms instructor. With the influx of gun sales on the rise and the bare minimum of training offered to civilians, Shawn saw a need for a resource where individuals could gain access to advanced self-defense and firearms training beyond the traditional standards. He's recently written his second book to bridge this gap called Tactical Training with Firearms, and I'm proud to say I've got that on the way to me in the mail even now. You can check out Shawn's work and his latest publication right at our website, www.iscqc.org/tactical. Now, Shawn, I want to jump right in here. What do you see as the biggest mistake most people make when it comes to tactical firearms training that could actually jeopardize their life if they're ever forced to use their skills in a real firefight?
One of the biggest mistakes I've seen, and I see it a lot, is over-dependency on their firearm. The tool rule, and anyone who's trained in knife defense should know this one. Testing has shown that you will not access your firearm before you are cut if your attacker is within 25 feet. To many people, they buy a gun, they train how to shoot it, and that's the end of their self-defense plan. They don't train in hand-to-hand because they have a gun. We've all heard the old adage, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, that's partially true. Chances are, unless you kill the gun-wielding person, you, with your first slash or thrust, you will probably get shot. But that would make the situation a mutual kill. And what is a mutual kill? It's a kill nonetheless. You need to train in gunfighting as a total package. Combatives and firearms. All fighting techniques. Even gunfighting come from empty-hand fighting techniques. You may not be able to access your weapon. The bad guy was standing next to you before he made his play. Maybe a knife edge strike to the throat would be your best option to get your weapon. Maybe a knife would be the best option in that given situation. Remember, a gun will kill 70% of the time, and a knife will kill 89% of the time. I'll take 89% over 70% any day. If you're going to be a successful gunfighter, you need to train without the gun. You need to learn to use everything you have. Training negotiation. The best gunfighter, or the best gunfight is one where you don't have to shoot the gun. Verbal force techniques, definitely a lost art. A technique first taught in the 70s has fallen to the wayside in the face of political correctness. But success in this area would be preferable to having to explain why you shot someone to the police. Have a total plan, not resting on one element. Remember, for everything you train, the bad guy has a say in how it comes out.
You know, it's funny, Shawn. I had a conversation prior to, I had a great training opportunity. There was a well-known firearms and combatants instructor who was going to be giving a weekend class. The cost for the training was like $400 for a weekend. Anybody who's done training like this knows that's a pretty good price, especially if you start to get into a named instructor, somebody you're familiar with. I mentioned it I was at a gun store with some friends, and I mentioned it, and there was a guy there who said, $400? He was just like the New York City salsa guy. New York City? He said, $400? I would never pay that much for training. What a ripoff. And that's what I realized. We tend to think of ourselves, gun owners, as people who should know better. We figure, okay, if the guy knew enough to buy a gun and he knows enough to understand the fundamental need for self-defense, that he's not going to fall too far from the tree. He's going to get the basic idea. But there are so many gun owners who won't even get the training that will help them because they figure, well, I bought the gun. If a guy comes at me, I'll just shoot him. The only martial art I know is some variation on the sound that the gun makes when you get it ready to shoot somebody, and therefore I'm all good. And it's so frustrating to be confronted with that attitude no matter how many times you see it go horribly awry in practice. Would you agree?
Well, that's kind of why I wrote the book. A lot of my relatives I'm surprised they wear shoes, the biggest rednecks and hicks in my county. And their self-defense claim, and I brought it up, is what if somebody broke into your house? Their claim, what if I shot someone? I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan. It's not easy to shoot someone. And I trained for 18 years before I ever saw combat. It's not easy to shoot someone. So if a trained person has a problem with that, what's someone who's not trained, not indoctrinated to do the government's bidding, so to speak?
Now, you mentioned, Shawn, some interesting statistics about how often a gun will kill you versus how often a knife will kill you. I'm very curious about those. Where do those come from?
I'm a knife instructor too, but they come from my executive protection training.
And why is that? Why will a knife kill you more often than a firearm?
Overpenetration, terminal ballistics. A knife won't leave your body. There's when you shoot a gun and it hits and ballistics are covered in the book very briefly, not a physics class, obviously. Terminal ballistics. A bullet, if it passes through you, it does cause cavitation, but the bigger the wound, the more chances of a fatal shot. With a knife, it's not passing through your body. It's reusable. I can cut, slash multiple times. Maybe I will get cut in a knife-on-knife fight, but I will guarantee you if I have a knife within 25 feet, we're going to have a mutual kill.
All right. Well, that is very sobering. Let's get into the training part of this, since that's the whole reason we're here tonight. What are the best training aids that you've found for cheap tactical firearms training for those who are on a budget? And this probably applies to all of us now, because with ammunition as expensive as it's gotten, and you see some of the rampant speculation, people selling boxes of 25 auto for $65 for 50 rounds on Gunbroker and stuff like that. It's crazy out there. What are some of the best training aids you've found for cheap tactical firearms training?
The cheapest, and this is going to sound funny, for tactical training, is your finger.
Now, it does sound funny. How can I use that?
Your finger? It's rehearsal, auto drills. We did it in the Army. We'd rehearse before we went on a mission. We'd use our hands because, you know what, it's safer to do that than to point a live weapon or a possible live weapon at someone. But anything will work. money's not an excuse to not to train. Paper plates. How much does a package of paper plates cost? And 22 caliber. What's that cost? I just thought, and that's going up too, to be perfectly frank. 22 caliber.
22 has been in short supply. It's been hard to find. Do you find yourself? Do you find yourself falling back on like airsoft or BB guns or just about anything else?
To be honest, I haven't. I don't even use airsoft BBs anymore. I train in combatives, close range shooting, martial arts combined with firearms because basically I'm training for home defense. I can't go to the range. I mean, even 308, and as you know, I'm a long range shooter. 308's becoming hard to find, so I've basically been working on the math on my computer. You can find simulators out there for long range shooting, but I haven't found. I mean, I play video games if you have to. Get your Xbox or your Wii out. Buy one of those gun, where you put the joystick. It's a gun type setup. Train that way if you have to. Whatever you can do. You go to the local bowling alley. Ammo's hard to find, but if you want to shoot, you can get bowling pins from most bowling alleys, the ones they don't use for like $1 a piece. The key is if you can't train because of ammo shortages, sit down and read the paper and look at the shooting incidents in your area or nationwide and conduct an after actions review on them. If it was a success, figure out why it was a success, why they succeeded in stopping the attack, and if it was a failure, what did they do wrong? People make the mistake of thinking gunfighting is all about shooting. And the biggest element to become a successful gunfighter is the mind, learning lessons and applying them. Shooting drills work, but so does knowing why you're doing the shooting drills. You need to learn from both success and failure. In the military, we call that lessons learned. Why I got blown up in Iraq, I learned from that. I survived, thankfully, and I learned from that and passed that on to the next generation after I retired.
Now, you mentioned going to bowling alleys and buying the worn-out bowling pins. Is that for shooting them when you do have ammo, or did you have another reason in mind?
Bowling pins, you can set up multiples. We use them for buddy drills. And they're cheap. They're about as cheap as a package of paper plates. And they're just fun to shoot, I guess. I've used recycled pizza boxes. I just spray paint some stuff on it, and that's what I use. You mentioned using your finger and sort of practicing and visualizing your targeting and the mechanics of what you're doing. I think people tend to underestimate the power of visualization when it comes to working your body through the motions of something. I believe they've determined that if you just visualize the mechanics of doing something very specifically and very methodically, your brain creates some of the same neural pathways, if that's how you say it. I may be playing fast and loose with the science, that it does when you're actually physically doing those things. So if I walk myself in my mind through walking up to the range and shooting at a target and holding my breath and letting it out and squeezing the trigger, these are all things that I could do physically, but if I visualize them, I'm getting some of the benefit of that. And I'm a big fan of the show Top Shot on whichever channel it's on. One of the teams in one of the recent seasons got made fun of because when they weren't training, when they weren't actually out shooting the guns, they were in the backyard of their group home practicing with their fingers or using mini golf putters and just anything they could find to visualize what they were going to do when they actually went through the competition. And, of course, they had a huge advantage when they actually competed against the other team that was laughing at them for looking silly. And I think that visualization component, as you've described it, is incredibly important. Oh, well, again, I think I said it earlier. All fighting techniques, whether it's with a firearm, knife, come from empty hand techniques. And guess who the best empty hand fighters were? The Japanese. and they do what we call kata. As a matter of fact, I'm really strong in the martial arts because of that reason. The mental focus, if you don't have that, stay home. If your mind isn't focused on the task, and you can visualize, before I go into competition, for instance, I visualize what my kumite is going to look like or what I want to do. It doesn't always work out, but I learn from that. And I visualize it better the next time. Kata. Kata is the same difference. Training those neurotransmitters to do the same thing every time, throwing a punch, throwing a kick, getting the proper stances. We all shoot. Look at the stances for shooting. They're the same from karate. The Weaver stance, that's nothing but a parallel stance. Or not parallel, that's a fighting stance. Parallel stance is what we call the iron triangle, which was taught in the Army for a long time. It's we draw everything from martial arts, even for shooting.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the hardware that people do use for inexpensive training. I myself have, lately I've become a connoisseur of alternative weapons because I live in the People's Republic of New York, where it's getting harder and harder to own just about everything. And I
so do I.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah. I live upstate or central New York. So.
Oh, a fellow bootlegger.
The 7-round limit is awesome.
Well, I've been, among other things, I went out and I purchased a very realistic BB gun, that closely resembles one of the real firearms that I still do have. I went and I purchased.
They have a pistol grip.
Well,
you're going to have to register that. It has a pistol grip. You'll have to register.
Well, yeah. But I went and I got some airsoft guns, which I think the airsoft thing tends to get a bad rap online, sometimes for good reasons, because you get a lot of kids on YouTube and places like that who think because they've played with an airsoft machine gun, they're suddenly commandos who understand firearms. But people who do train in firearms can get so much benefit from supplementing their training with things like airsoft guns and with pellet guns. I recently purchased something coincidentally designed by one of the people who competed on that show, Top Shot. It's called the SIRT pistol. I don't know if people say CERT or not. I've never actually heard it pronounced. But that SIRT pistol is nothing but a Glock-like laser pistol that shows you one color of laser when you start to pull the trigger, and then gives you another color of laser when the trigger actually breaks. You can change magazines. You can do all of the mechanics you would normally do except for racking the slide. I have found that immensely helpful, and it takes no ammunition. It is a paperweight that makes light. So it's perfectly legal everywhere, and yet I can use that with, standard Glock pistol accessories like a holster and everything else. You could even put live magazines in the inert gun if you have those magazines and you want to train magazine changes with them. And I found that to be extremely helpful. It's not cheap to purchase the pistol, but it never costs you any more money after that except for maybe some batteries down the road. So in that way, it pays for itself pretty quickly and gives you endless hours of training opportunity.
Anything that enhances that muscle memory, stoppages and magazine changes. Magazine changes kill people, and stoppages. 99% of all stoppages or malfunctions on a pistol are due to the magazine. So, and pistol break, I'm speaking personally. I've been in close quarters battle before, and your trigger squeeze really doesn't matter at the ranges we were fighting at. And unless you're Donald Trump, probably won't matter in your home either. On the street, definitely. Pay attention to your trigger squeeze, but you can use a ballpoint pen for that. Your trigger squeeze and trigger break, you can use a ballpoint pen.
Oh, you mean like pushing the switch on the pen, like on a clicky pen?
Oh, yeah, and it will break almost like a double-action trigger, like the AR-15. That's how I learned to shoot the M110 sniper rifle, was using that pen technique for that, the trigger break, and then the hold, and then you squeeze it back out. Now you're ready for that second shot, and the trigger squeeze won't be that hard.
I am holding a pen in my hand. Can you walk me through that drill Like, how do I actually perform the drill?
Well, each pen has a spring on it, and just like a trigger, and you squeeze it to that point where you start to get that tension. Then you hold it slightly, and that's when you start your breathing, and you hold your breath, and then you finish that squeeze, and you feel it break. Then you release it, but you don't release it all the way. You only release it at that point where it clicks again, where you're sitting there. So it's almost like the second shot is actually a single-stage trigger. The first shot's a double. With that second stage, you're only resetting that sear to the point where it's real easy to get that second shot off, which is why I like semi-automatic rifles for multiple targets. I don't have to take my finger off the trigger.
That is actually brilliant. I'm sitting here doing the drill with my pen.
Believe it or not, a cop showed me that, which is astonishing because they're some of the worst shots I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I think most people tend to think that police officers are extremely well trained, and of course that's propagated by things you hear that, well, only our highly trained police should be trusted with certain evil weapons of destruction.
People are misguided in the sense their job is to enforce the law, not to shoot people. My job in the military was to shoot people. There's a difference. They enforce the law. I go out. People shoot at me. I shoot back. That was my job. It's
now,
and the things you get used to is just astounding.
Well, I'd like to draw on your military experience here, Shawn. One of the areas that you focus on is being able to fight your attacker in order to get to your gun in an ambush. What problems do you see in the way this is usually taught, and can you give us a step-by-step training drill that we could use to practice this skill the right way?
Well, I'll give you some examples of the way it's trained. It's probably still trained, which is horrendous. I mean, I watch them train it at some of the police academies, and you'll see my jaw muscles just not right up. But the biggest problem I see is it's trained separately from martial arts. Now, I know people, and I take martial arts. I know people who take martial arts and then go to the range and do shooting drills, never put the two together. Now, police academies, and again, that's where the jaw muscles come in, is teaching empty hand self-defense, and then weapons training is two different classes. Well, let's look at the problem with the traditional close quarters shooting techniques. I don't know if you've ever done the speed, rock, shove, and shoot, where you lean back, put your gun, and shoot. Well, you lean back, I'm going to punch you in the face, and I'm going to take your gun.
Fortunately, that was already considered an outdated technique when I started training, so no one ever, I never had to unlearn it.
Shoot. You have the shove and shoot, which I didn't do the lean back and shoot. I did the shove and shoot. You shove an assailant with your hand, you step back, draw your weapon, you fire. The problem with that technique is hitting someone with one hand is going to have little effect. You're losing power because you're stepping back. And then another problem is you're moving. Like, how many people have 8 feet in there? I mean, my office right now, I don't have 8 feet to step back and draw my weapon and shoot. So I don't use that technique. What I use is called an elbow technique, and I don't know if anybody's taken martial arts. But as your attacker advances, I step in and I blast him in the chest. And as I'm doing that, I drop my center of gravity. The key is by spreading your feet, not bending over. A lot of people want to bend their back and hit with the elbow. You intersect them with your elbow. You strike with purpose. You draw from underneath with that right angle draw stroke that's in the book. Then you fire because you're hitting them wherever that right angle draw stroke. Remember, you're almost point blank. When you draw that pistol, wherever you put that on your body, you're going to have good muzzle to body alignment, and that wherever you put that on your body, you're going to hit him on his body. Now, the problems with that technique is you're not going to stop a determined attacker. He's on meth or coke, and you may take some punishment to the head. Deflecting the attack. This is the one I use. Of course, I study martial arts. The attacker approaches you. You step offline. You redirect the attacker's body weight. Usually, I'll slap his hand away, and I'll slap it hard. I mean, it's a strike. It's like a knife edge or a ridge hand, something really hard. I'll draw my weapon as I step offline, and I fire. Now, the advantage is to that, you can see where you're going. You may not have to kill the attacker. You have any martial arts training, which I do. I'm usually I'll land a roundhouse, or actually, if he's got a weapon, I'm going to shoot him. But I carry pepper spray, and if you're in New York, I recommend you carry pepper spray. You may be able to incapacitate the assailant, and in the court of law, this saves a whole great deal of headache, especially in a liberal state like New York. The downside, most average people don't have the skill. Most people don't train in martial arts. They buy a gun, and that's where their self-defense ends. And if you're at the wrong angle, you're going to take damage to the head. Now, to offset the downside, you train this as a martial arts technique. Train with variations on angles and intensity. Not every attacker is going to come in with an overhead swing or pull a knife and do a straight-in shot. The more aggressive ones will not be easy to turn, so that's why I strike hard. I don't care if I hurt my training partner. If he gets bruises on his arms, good for him. I'm helping him out. An attacker comes in and waist grabs you, will not be able to deflect as he is moving with your body. My advice to that, learn martial arts. Everybody, for some reason, thinks once you buy the gun, martial arts, you don't need to know martial arts or any self-defense stuff, or you don't need the pepper spray. You can just pull the gun. And I use it, I train in what we call a striking bag drill, and I use 3D targets. And the advantages of 3D targets, you'll find out the military switched from the square targets to 3D targets because it basically desensitizes you to shooting people. But it adds a mental effect that comes with shooting a human being. In a self-defense situation, there are only two choices. You shoot or die. There's no wounding shots, no warning shots. This will give the attacker time to kill you, because this is really close. You set the pad diagonal to the angle of fire. And you can go to any martial arts, you can order them online. They're kick pads, basically. Buy a kick pad. Have your buddy hold it diagonal to the angle of fire. And on the whistle, you strike the target several times. And I don't mean you pity pat it. I mean you put your friend on his butt if you can. Then you turn and fire at the target. Now there's a variation to that on the whistle. Again, you strike the target like it's a fight. This isn't a shooting competition. The target holder fades away for safety. Then you turn and you fire at the target. If at any time during the drill, now I throw this out here for safety, you think something's not going safe, you yell stop. Don't play games with guns. Don't play games with guns in martial arts. Okay? It's very close to the target. I mean, probably arm's reach. You're being attacked by multiple people. When practicing any self-defense technique, with or without a firearm, practice with as much stress as possible. This will become muscle memory. When you train, be aggressive. Remember, you're training for a fight, not a shooting competition. This ain't Top Shot.
All right. Now, Shawn, in your book, you state that force-on-force studies have shown that statistically we will most likely get hit in the gun arm if shot because an assailant will be focused on the gun arm while he's engaging us. This isn't something most people train for. Can you give us a good drill we could use to simulate this type of problem?
Oh, no problem. The force-on-force training shows statistically that we will most likely get hit in the gun arm. As the bad guy is focused on the immediate threat we pose, hopefully you're not focusing on his gun muzzle. You're focusing on his chest where you're going to put rounds. But he's focusing on the muzzle of our gun, which behind that is our gun arm. Now, this drill will get you used to reacquiring your weapon and putting steel on target. You want to place the weapon in red status. Now, I don't use numbers because it's, a mental thing. Red. What's red tell you? Guess what? There's a bullet in the chamber, magazine in the gun. It's ready to go. You put it on the ground in front of you. Now, you back up approximately 5 feet. Now, you're going to gradually increase that distance to become more proficient because you're shooting with your weak hand. I blow a whistle, you run up, you acquire your weapon in your weak hand, and you fire 2 rounds. The idea is you've been hitting the gun arm, and you're going to drop your gun. You're going to have to pick it up with your weak hand to continue the fight. You can also include lateral movement, the use of cover, and reloading drills with this one. You're shooting around corners, and the corner you're shooting around, and you're using your strong hand will put you at greater risk. You're going to want to use your weak hand. So this also adds to that tactical mentality of it, where maybe you didn't get hit, but you still want to use your weak hand so you can cut your cross section to the bad guy. This just adds reacquiring the weapon to the drill. We train this in the military where you don't shoot around corners, or around corners where you're going to put your chest out there. So you'd use your weak hand even with a rifle and engage targets. With that drill, I've used it. Some of the people think it's fun because it also adds stress. If I make you run fast enough back and forth, I'll make you do it 10 times. Raises the heart rate, gets the arm shaking. It's as close as I can get to the stress of combat. I mean, obviously I can't shoot at you, so.
Okay, now here's another permutation, Shawn. Many people would never think to go to the ground in a tactical shooting, and people will tell you all day long, don't go to the ground in an actual fight. I know you have a different opinion. When would someone choose to go to the ground to fire back at an attacker, and what are some of the key points someone can train on their own to prepare for this type of a scenario?
Well, people need to remember there are two things you need to increase gunfight survivability: space and time. This gives you both. Remember, we train from behind the curve. We've been surprised. The attacker is in our face. We need to make space and time. Instead of standing and fighting with the guy, we drop to the ground. We draw and fire. And the drill I use, the attacker goes for a grab, a punch, or an offensive move. Let's say he has a knife or something. You drop to the ground. You use your feet to kick the assailant either away from you or off of you if he decides to drop on you. You bicycle your feet. It's like walking into a fan for the attacker. And we've done this in knife fighting. I do it in knife fighting too. That bicycle kick will keep someone off of you even if he has a knife. You draw your weapon, you fire. Now the advantages are the attacker has a split second where he's disoriented because he has to change up his attack strategy to a ground fight. And in a hand-to-hand fight, you're going to end up on your back anyway. To go to the ground, and this is important, and most people don't train in jiu-jitsu or judo, where you're going to fall on your back. You need to bring one leg up behind the knee of the other leg, collapse your post knee, drop to your butt, ensure you tuck your head because unconscious means you're dead anyway. You bicycle kick, you draw your weapon, and you fire. An important adjustment needs to be made to adjust for the point of aim and the point of impact. Remember, you're shooting up now. You cross your ankles. You draw your weapon. Place the weapon between your knees. These are your aiming stakes. Then you don't want to shoot your foot off. Keep your feet elevated below the muzzle of your weapon so you can transition back to kicking if need be. Or if your attacker, after he's been shot, is going to fall on you, you can kick him to the side. But remember, even if it's a fatal shot, he has 12 seconds to do whatever he's going to do, even if he runs out of oxygen or blood. He has 12 seconds after you put those rounds in him. To compensate for the shooting angle, especially with bystanders around, you want to shoot up, not into a bystander. You want to try and shoot your attacker in the crotch. This will compensate for the angle because it's going to go up through the abdomen. Hopefully it strikes his spine and just cuts that straight off. The key to making the kick work is not to pump your feet in a straight in and out. This makes it easier to grab them and throw them to the side and jump on top of you. You have to cycle your legs like you're riding a bike. Once you are on the ground, you are there for the duration of the fight. In a multiple attacker scenario, this is a tough position to be in, so you need to look at the situation you're in. Standing and fighting might be your best option. This is just something to throw in your toolbox. Period. If they're standing back, let's say you have cover. I'd fall behind a low brick wall. I'm not going to fall on my face. I'm going to fall on my back, put my feet against that brick wall where I can roll out and put fire on the bad guys. Again, just something to put in your toolbox. People don't think about it.
I think there's another thing people don't think about, and that is making the shoot or don't shoot decision. For a lot of people, this is a really gray area, and they think they're going to take time to make that decision. They're going to debate it in their head and determine if they're going to do it or not. In a real-life attack, you may only have a split second to decide whether you're going to shoot or you're going to hold your fire, and if you're wrong, you die. What practice drill do you have that someone could use to train for this type of judgment in shooting, the shoot or no shoot decision?
No, I have a bunch. If you're at home and you own a computer, obviously you do because you'll be listening to this, you already have a tool. Today, discrimination shooting is taught with, like in the classroom, I use my computer and slides quickly put up and numbered, and you simply check off shoot or don't shoot on the piece of paper. And that's before you go to the range. And you're going to do more discrimination shooting there. These are usually low-light pictures where you aren't instantly sure if it's a thug or a family member climbing through your window. Remember, if you have a teenage daughter, they may sneak out. Or I got told when I was training with the DOD police, where they put up a picture of a guy holding a can of beer, and I put two in his chest. Well, guess what? You know what? I'd still do it just because I want the beer. But that's here nor there. Little humor there. But like in we have, if you have video games, like I have one here with the Marines, and they have civilians in there on one of the missions, I use that too. At the range, you can use little pieces of paper with the civilians or thugs. I can print them out here. You can download them from the internet. They have them where some ranges, I wouldn't go there. They cost too much, where the computer can record whether you shot a civilian or a thug. What I was taught with was you can use colored handprints on cardboard. That was the pizza box idea. I had a bunch of pizza boxes. I spray painted my handprints on it. And your instructor calls out a color. You shot the corresponding color within a given time frame. Now, colored shapes can be used, but you want to put like yellow triangles on a target and mix them with red triangles, mixed with circles, various colors, and squares.
Now how would you use those when you're shooting them? Do you put the targets up at the other end of the range and then you're just going as fast as you can through them and trying not to hit the wrong ones, or are you actually changing out the targets?
Right. You change out the targets because you want the brain to think and start working to recognize. Our brain works in patterns. We see patterns for most people. If they see patterns, like it's like music. I can differentiate music, chord, patterns, whatever, because it's a pattern. Our brain works on patterns. We need to train the brain to look for different patterns. Like, you know what your daughter looks like coming through a window, or where she looks like, you know, her silhouette. You need to learn that pattern. So if a thug's coming through the window, it doesn't quite look like the daughter sneaking in from a date with her boyfriend that you don't like. Or the neighbor, you found your dog and he's at your front door, and you don't want to be blasting holes through the door, unlike what Joe Biden would do. You're training your brain to look at shapes and colors and sizes, and that's all you're doing. We have, like, if you have, like I have a Wii, I train with a Marine Corps team I have here. The Army has its own version. It's an entire building. I got reprimanded. I used 2 30-round magazines on one terrorist, but you know what? He went down. I'm sure Governor Cuomo's losing his mind right now hearing that. But you need to make it intense, and you need to train your brain to recognize shapes, because you'll see in the low-light shooting scenario, you're going to flash, and you're going to get a shape. That's all you're going to get. if you're smart. You turn your flashlight on, and I'm a bad guy. I'm just going to shoot you behind your flashlight. Take your flashlight and your weapon. But you're basically just training your brain. That's all you're doing. We work in patterns, our brain, most of us.
Being in the military, and you've alluded to it several times, Shawn, you've conducted a lot of force-on-force training, something a lot of people don't get the chance to do. What's the best way that someone on a budget can train for a force-on-force encounter?
Well, when it comes to force-on-force and training, I've done the miles thing in the Army, very expensive, I might add. And I've competed in paintball competitions at the local courses here, where there's 16-year-old kids show up with a $1,000 speedball gun for a scenario-based tournament that mom and dad bought them. And if you're on a budget like I am, contrary to popular belief, an Army pension isn't as much as you think. What happens when people buy the high-priced equipment, they start relying on the equipment. And when it fails, they're lost. They don't build skills, except how to put more gadgets on their guns. I don't know if you've priced paintballs lately, but a case is going for about $100 a pop. Not a real budget-oriented method of training. For realism, airsoft is a good alternative because the equipment will work with the equipment you already have. Your holster and magazine changes can be added to any training. Depending on the gun you buy, it can be quite expensive. I've been looking at a fully auto AR-15 airsoft. You can train with a cap pistol, even a squirt gun. This training is not about marksmanship. It's not about the equipment. It's about the tactics. Learn to do with less. When you learn to do with less, when you have it good, you're going to be that much better. I've trained with simunitions. They hurt. So they give pain compliance, but expensive. And unless you're military or law enforcement, you're not going to get any. There's an old saying, keep it simple, stupid. Train with what you have. Tactical training is not about marksmanship. It's about tactics. You can get a squirt gun. Practice clearing your house. There are advantages to each method of training and disadvantages, like paintball. I've done paintball. It makes a mess. A Tipman 98 Custom, which is what I had, is running for about $120. They don't work with your existing equipment, such as your holster, and you can incorporate magazine changes. And I wouldn't recommend using them in cold weather. Not that I'd like to go out in the cold anyway. Airsoft, you can get airsoft that will work with your equipment, such as your holster. And there can be magazine changes involved. However, I found out cleaning up those little BBs can be a pain in the butt, especially when you're using them in the house.
Wives hate those.
Yeah. I see a lot of people running around with the airsoft guns without the proper safety equipment. You need to wear proper safety equipment, and I include that in my book, an entire section on safety. I'm real big on safety for any firearms training. If you want to, see my jaw knot up, start talking, let me see a safety violation, I will freak out. You can use squirt guns, cap pistols. They can be effective in tactical movement, carry positions, even combatives training. Red or blue guns, fairly expensive. Being a martial arts instructor, I know that firsthand. But they can be used quite effectively in movement and combatives training. In the Army, we use miles, basically laser tag. Recently, I was out at Walmart, and they have a laser tag system for $25. However, you can't use it with your existing equipment. You can't do magazine changes. And I would wear safety glasses with it. It's still a laser. With force-on-force training in the book, I include a safety section. We have way too many accidents every year with people using live weapons on a force-on-force scenario every year. When I was in the Army, more than once, live ammo made it into the blank inventory, which are needed to operate the miles system, which was always awesome because we had to always dump our magazines and go through our magazines to make sure nobody got shot.
Right, I would imagine if you fire a live round into a weapon that's equipped with miles gear, it'll destroy the laser implement on the end of the barrel, too.
Well, not to mention the blank adapter. That'd be awesome. But if you want to train on a budget, my recommendation is you can get fairly cheap airsoft. You can get single-shot pistols fairly cheap. I paid $5. I have like 5 of them here of Glock replicas. They're single shot. You have to charge them every time you fire them. There's a plus to that training. It causes you to train more effectively with malfunctions more efficiently. It's going to sound funny, but in the Army I did rehearsals using my finger yelling bang, bang, bang. I've survived 2 combat tours, 1 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. It must work. And you know what? I'd still do the finger thing as a rehearsal just to save money at this point. Ammo's getting just way too cheap. I can't even find 308 anymore for my sniper rifle.
Now, we've talked a lot about gear and hardware, Shawn. It's really hard to instill a sense of adrenaline that even comes close to what you'll experience in a real-life shooting, life-or-death attack. Do you have any drills or exercises that you know of that could help someone condition themselves for the chaos and the adrenaline of a real gunfight?
Well, first you're going to need to get physically fit. To increase adrenaline and getting an increase in heart rate, which is going to get you shaking a little bit, and to indoctrinate yourself to operate under pressure, you can. What we do is we placed our weapon on the firing line. Then we place our magazines, all of them, 20 meters behind the fire line. When the instructor yells go or blows a whistle, you run to the ammo point, which is where you put your magazines, and you run back to the fire line, and you don't take your time. You lock and load your weapon, and you fire. Then you add discrimination shooting into that after you're doing all this running back and forth. And you do this multiple times. Don't do it once and think, well, you know, I got my heart rate up. No. You do this multiple times. But after you've done that, you blindfold yourself or put a hood over your head. Or we used to put, those hoodies, we put them on backwards. And you're led to the firing line. After you've done those drills, you take possession of your weapon. We have an assistant instructor standing there right with you because you're obviously blindfolded and in control of a weapon. The instructor makes sure you're locked and loaded. And then they remove the blindfold or they flip the hood down. And then you get people yelling at you. You got to remember, combat's loud. Even if it's, your gunfire and the bad guy's gunfire going back and forth, it's still loud and it's going to be disorienting. Matter of fact, if you can get more than one person yelling at you, the better. This adds stress because you don't know what's going on. There may be bystanders in the area, and I would put up pictures of, innocents with thugs. As you're being yelled at, the blindfolds just come off. Now you have to pick which target you're going to shoot at, and you have people yelling in your ear. Now, you didn't know the situation. You have multiple people screaming at you to get the job done. So picture the adrenaline going at that point. Obviously, we can't shoot at you to get you that combat feel, but that'll get you going pretty good to where you're stuttering pretty good. Another good drill is calisthenics. You get the heart rate up, and you get the arms shaking. And as you move down range, you're engaging targets. Every 10 meters or so, I have you do push-ups, 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups. Now, you make sure you take possession, and you have an assistant instructor take possession of the weapon as he's doing his calisthenics, because you don't want him doing push-ups and sit-ups with a loaded weapon. Now, I do is 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups. That's 50 of each for a pistol. And that will get the heart rate up and the arm shaking, the leg shaking, your stomach, you're just breathing hard. You do this every 10 meters or so. Now, with a pistol, maximum effective range is 50 meters. With a rifle, I'd kill you. Now, you're trying to get the arm shaking, the adrenaline flowing, and this teaches combat shooting under physical stress. I can't simulate bullets flying over your head. Unfortunately, that's illegal, but I can hurt your body enough to where you'll get the feel where, and I'll tell you, you'll tense up in combat to the point where the next day every muscle in your body's aching and you're exhausted. So this is kind of as close as I can get.
Okay. Lots of people like to go to the range with a friend. Let's turn this around and actually talk about live fire. Are there any fun drills that you could share that people could use to hone their tactical firearm skills while being more interactive with a fellow shooter on a live fire range? I mean, beyond shooting each other, which obviously you can't do.
Well, I know drills. Before you go to the range with a buddy, know who that buddy is and his skill level. 2, before you go, have a plan. Now, I call them battle drills. That's what and I use the word battle on purpose. When someone is trying to take your life, that's battle. Each one of us should know the battle drill and their piece of it. Once you have a plan, you have to practice how to execute it. Because if you just go to the range with your buddy, you might as well be drinking beers and just running up and down the range shooting targets. But you have to have something you're training on. After you execute that plan, you have to figure out what you did right and what you did wrong. You do an after-action review, which is covered in the book. 3 things you need to know when you're working with a buddy in a shooting situation. You need to know how to move so you don't shoot each other and you maximize the use of your firepower, which is the shoot part. And you need to know how to communicate, how to talk to each other, because that's how people get shot. If you can't do those things together, having a firearm does you no good. If you can't do those things, you're as much of a threat to your buddy as the bad guy. So have a plan. Everybody knows the plan, practice plan, refine the plan. Now, I do a individual movement drill with anyone I train, especially the husband and wife. That's a big deal with me. If you have multiple gun owners in a household, I do what we call individual movement techniques, where you move downrange and you're bounding. When a person moves ahead, one person covers, and you're communicating. Everybody, as one person gets in, let's say, the kneeling position to cover, while the other person's moving, says set. Whoever's in the kneeling position, I'm set. I'm ready to cover you. The next person says moving. Lets them know they're ready to go. And they're going to go through the house like that. Or they're going to be on the street. If you're on the street, let's say you both have concealed carry permits, you need to communicate. And then we have the what I call the family member rescue drill, which is basically a hostage aversion drill is what I call it, because that's communication and that's counterintuitive to 99% of the population to grab a hold of somebody who has a weapon. That's, let's say your wife was in a struggle with someone, she drew her firearm and someone was struggling with her. Grab a hold of your wife, draw your weapon, right angle draw stroke, that's in the book, folks. I'm not going to give you everything for free. And put as much hurt on the bad guy as possible. That's communication as well. If you don't know your wife's in a struggle, you're not going to go help her. Basically, it's move, shoot, communicate. That's the drill I would use to teach them to move, shoot, and communicate. It's called a bounding drill or individual movement techniques, collective movement techniques. We do it in lanes training. Lanes training is covered in the book as well. How to set up training for the family, for yourself, individual to collective tasks, so on and so forth.
Low light tactical training is all the rage these days, Shawn. And you can get great flashlights now, cheaper than ever before, brighter than ever before, practically melt your face off. You can get laser sights and flashlights that have lasers. And how could someone train tactically for low light conditions in either dry fire or live fire conditions?
First thing I have to say is get rid of the lasers. Lasers are a daylight resource. They don't illuminate anything. They are used to increase accuracy at close range quickly if you can see your target. At night, all a laser is an aiming point for your attacker. You need to learn the various techniques of using tactical flashlights, both rail-mounted and freestanding, such as the brief-on techniques, high-low deception, flash and move deception, blind and shoot, flash, move, shoot. Most ranges close, especially here in New York, before nightfall due to their insurance costs. You might be able to compensate by finding an indoor range, using dark glasses. Most gun owners don't train for low light shooting, and unfortunately that's when most home invasions and robberies occur. Criminals don't normally operate in the daytime, which is weird because in Iraq they never operated at night because they knew we had night vision. Get used to your equipment failing. Flashlights work on batteries. They will fail. Get used to using the flash move technique, which is basically you use the flash in your muzzle, see the bad guy, move, and shoot where you just saw him. That's like bottom of the line, like World War II stuff. My recommendation, put motion sensors in your house for your lights. They're actually fairly inexpensive. I've seen them at Walmart. So it's for night fighting. I would definitely be looking at other methods to enhance your gunfighting survivability. They will, if the lights come on, they'll normally leave, so you may not have to shoot anybody, which is, as far as legally, probably going to save you a whole lot of money. Put on your body armor at night. Yes, folks, body armor is legal for everyone except felons, just like a gun. And you put on your body armor and you go out there and take care of business. It drives me nuts when people don't purchase. They'll purchase the gun, which is more expensive than the body armor, but they won't purchase the body armor. It drives me nuts. I have mine hanging right here out in my shop right now. If you don't have a flashlight, and he does, and this is the flash move, I'm going to describe it to you because it works. You'll shoot at his flashlight. You'll illuminate him with the flash for the shot. Move, that lateral movement you'll find in the book as well. Do your lateral movement. Get a quick second shot off. Another technique is to squat low on the ground. I would prefer behind cover, and the instant he switches his light on, if he hasn't, most criminals will carry a flashlight because, they're robbing your place at night. You fire at his light. Now, remember, if you don't have a light and he does, what if he's a cop? It's very hard to discriminate when you can't illuminate your subject. My advice, if you haven't called the police yet, guess what? He's probably not a cop.
All right.
But here's another drill. You're going to start from 25 feet, not yards. Usually I do in yards or meters. I like meters because, being from the military. This drill is timed. The shooter will be firing at 5 bowling pins. Remember, you get them for $1 a piece at your local bowling alley, if you have one. You set the pins on a level table. Now, the goal is to knock all of the pins completely off the table. All right, the shooters begin with the pistols loaded and ready. The pistol must be touching the ready table at the start. At the signal, you lift the pistol and you engage the pins. The time starts when the signal is given. The time stops when the last pin falls off the table. The shooter may reload his or her weapon as often as needed. Additional weapons may be kept on the ready table. Awesome for transition training. I prefer they be in the holster or in an ankle holster. Really get used to using those ankle holsters. Should the primary weapon run completely out of ammunition, you need a stopwatch with hundreds of seconds capability to keep it timed. Now, the training idea, some of your shooters may wear glasses or contacts. It's possible that dark glasses may be used to simulate low-light conditions for a shooter while still enabling you as an instructor to see the target and the shooter. If this can be accomplished safely, have your shooters wear dark glasses to engage some of the targets. I like that drill.
Shawn.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Were you done, or did you have more?
Oh, no, that's the drill, and it's a fun drill. We do it. Actually, we do it to see who's buying beer, but.
Well, Shawn, people typically train, and you've hinted at it here, and we've talked about it, under the best conditions when using their firearm. what's a good dose of reality that you think many people don't expect to happen but does in a real firefight, and how can they better prepare for the unexpected?
What I've talking to people, not military or law enforcement, everyone wants to think they're Wyatt Earp. My own cousin has rifles, and what if someone broke in the house? Well, I'd shoot him. Everybody wants to think they're Wyatt Earp. Well, let me remind you, Wyatt Earp was shot in the back of the head and died. Train from behind the curve. The bad guys will always look for the advantage. They will try to surprise you. They will try and talk their way into your sphere of defense. And anybody who's taken any martial arts knows what a sphere of defense is. Okay, you need to be prepared to punch, kick, stab, or shoot. I know people like myself, I wear glasses, and I've become accustomed to shooting without glasses. If you can't see the sights on your pistol without glasses, increase your training in instinctive shooting, or point shooting as it's called. Learn to watch the palms, even without your glasses. Something that looks like a gun or a knife probably isn't a badge or a can of beer, which I mentioned that target earlier. I got hammered with by the DOD police. Practicing identifying them without your glasses. Learn to read body language. Someone threatening with a knife or a gun will make certain movements. That doesn't look like they want to shake your hand or pat you on the back. If your glasses do get broken, don't go moving through your house. And this is for home defense, unless you absolutely have to. The defender always has the advantage. Let them come to you. Clearing a room for trained professionals is something that we dread. But for someone who doesn't do it for a living, without their glasses, that can pretty much be suicide. If they've already attacked you, obviously do what you have to do. Do the right angle draw stroke, get that muzzle to body alignment, and squeeze off, put as much hurting on them as you can. To add emotional stress, and this is going to sound sick, but this will add emotional stress to your training. Have a family member role play when you're during your training, such as your wife, whom you're supposed to love. I'm not making any judgments here. Have them lay on the floor and scream she's been injured. You might want to let your neighbors know about the training if you're going to do that at home. This will teach you to control emotion and do what's best for both of you for your survival. You have to learn to control your emotions to make sound, tactical decisions, such as eliminating the threat before treating a loved one for wounds. Remember, if you get killed because you made an emotional decision, you both will probably die. Always train where the attacker's always going to be behind you. He's always going to be able to put his hands on you. Gunfighting is a martial art. It is no different than karate, jiu-jitsu, judo, aikido. It's a martial art. Martial meaning military. It is a martial art. Train accordingly. Learn to use your hands. Learn to use your feet. Learn to use anything on your body. A knife, a headbutt, whatever. Learn that a gun is not the end-all, be-all in self-defense, or I guarantee I will read your obituary if you're ever attacked.
Well, that is a sobering thought. Now, Shawn, before we close out, I know a special certain someone wants to jump in here with his input.
Hey, guys.
How's it going?
Hey, all right. Hey, listen, this is Jeff Anderson, president of the ISCQC. I just wanted to jump on here because, I've been listening. I've been sitting here taking notes on everything that Shawn's been saying, and I just say I bought Shawn's book a few weeks ago, and I couldn't put it down. It was absolutely amazing. Some really great tips in there for everything from live fire to dry fire. I mean, you've heard some of the great tips from the book today, but there's a whole lot in there. I mean, he really over-delivered in it. So I just wanted to give my personal recommendation to definitely get this book. And I'm sure Buck's going to go ahead and give the link again where you can pick up a copy of that book. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a must-have. It's really hard to find good quality drills and well thought out exercises that are unique and inexpensive and really, really practical for what really happens in combat. So, Shawn, I want to thank you, not just for tonight, but just for putting the book out and just really creating an amazing piece of work.
No problem. And I just want to put out there to all my instructors, none of this is original. It's just years of experience and hanging out with the right people. And I got to give those guys credit.
Now, that link again to get Shawn's book is right at our own website, www.iscqc.org/tactical. That will take you over to the links that have been set up there. I myself have a copy of Shawn's latest book on the way to me as well. Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to add tonight?
No, I've just got a lot of work to do. I got to go get some bowling pins, some pizza boxes, which ought to be fun, and get ready to have a good time.
All right. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights with us tonight.
Oh, no problem. I enjoy sharing.
And thank you to all of you who joined us tonight and who sent in your questions during the broadcast. As always, this has been the fastest hour of my week. On behalf of all of us here, since Jeff is with us, we'll make him say it.
Train hard, stay safe, prepare now.
Good night, everybody.